Welcome back to I Am Nami, Kansas, a mental health podcast made by Kansans for Kansans. Today, we're going to be talking about advocacy, what it is, what it looks like. And the reason for that is because right now we're in the middle of the legislative season here in Kansas. So our Kansas House representatives and senators come together in January and start looking at bills and passing them, and it runs all the way through May. So again, we're right in the heart of it. And with us today, we're going to have three guests. Our first guest is going to be Chris, our advocacy director here at Nami, Kansas. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here with us today. So my first question for you, just for the audience, what is advocacy? How would you define that?
So for me, to be an advocate is an act of service. It is using your voice to influence decision makers and demand change, policy, and systems that work to benefit humanity.
That's a great definition. I didn't think you were going to go that hard on it. I love that definition. That's great. So then my next question is, why is it important?
So advocacy is important because it's empowering people to have a voice and speaking for them when they can't and supporting them to speak for themselves when they can't.
Yeah, so throughout this episode, we're talking with Lori and Cindy, who both have experiences doing advocacy work. So we're going to see this expanded on more. But to you, how have you seen advocacy done? Is it only in a certain area? Have you seen it done in different ways? How have you seen it done?
So basically, you can advocacy is at many levels. Like you can advocate at a school level, a community, and a state level. You can get involved with your county or city commissions, go to school board meetings and advocate there for certain policies that you would like to see changing to benefit the students, the community, and the statewide legislation as a whole. So you can get involved in many levels, and I've seen it from the time that I was in school to the time that I became an adult.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. Have you seen any real examples of policy? It could be anything. It doesn't have to be mental health necessarily, but have you seen it in action and have a positive impact on people?
Yes, actually I have. So I think it was back in 2023, we advocated for a substance abuse harm reduction policy where we would legalize fentanyl test strips to help people test to see if fentanyl is in illicit drugs that they're using. And that ended up passing at the Senate and legislation level. And now it is legal to carry fentanyl test strips around for people that have substance abuse issues to find out if they are going to be endorsing a lethal dose of fentanyl.
That's awesome. That saves a lot of lives. I didn't realize that happened last year. Wow, thank you for telling me.
Yeah, no problem.
So, Chris, how long have you been doing advocacy work?
So, I want to say it started about 3 years ago when I met a good friend of mine, Seth Dewey. He's a public health educator for harm reduction, works for the Reno County Health Department. He kind of got me into it. He didn't get me into it, but he got me intrigued enough to kind of learn about it. And he is a big mentor of mine, and I follow his work dearly. So I got into it because I like to learn things. I like the knowledge of it. And knowledge is the foundation of effective advocacy. So that's kind of what drew me into it. So for the past 3 years, I've kind of just stumbled along and like followed along with certain bits and pieces of legislative session, and then up and until I think it was November when I found out about Nami, Kansas, that I was like, oh man, this sounds awesome. And they had the public policy and advocacy director position come open, and I was like, oh, maybe I can just like volunteer and everything, and I got a job there, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, so it's something I'm super passionate about. But I would definitely say it's been the past 3 years that it's became a real big passion of mine to advocate for policy changes throughout the state of Kansas.
I really like that you said that knowledge is essential for effective advocacy work. How do you learn more about these policies that you're pursuing? Is it like real life experience? Is it talking with people? Is it looking stuff up?
So, like for myself, I'm a person with lived experience, both with substance abuse issues and mental illness issues. So for me, I kind of followed along with what my good friend Seth Dewey does, and he puts me on a bunch of good information, and then you can get with Quorum. Quorum is a I don't know really how to explain it, but it gives you bills and certain legislation to follow. And then same with Fast Democracy. It's another website that you can type in and see certain bills and have them text message you to follow what's going on with the legislative session. So other than that, I do a lot of reading and a lot of research just on my spare time. And Google is one of my best friends.
So you had a support network that obviously has been helpful for you. Were there anything else, or were there any other things that were helpful for you to get over that anxiety or to kind of ease you into the process?
Yeah, having a mentor in it, and then taking the Nami Smarts classes as well, really helped me out, because before, when I was writing testimony and advocating for it, I didn't know really how to piece together my story or how to advocate for it correctly. So I would just write maybe 5 or 6 paragraphs of, hey, this is why it needs to happen, why it would affect me and multiple others. And once I learned how to advocate correctly, it really helped out. So the Nami Smarts program did an amazing wonders. And then my mentor, Seth Dewey, of course, helped me out quite a bit. Thomas Simmons. And then finding out how to do like public speaking as well helped out. And so those are a couple of things that really helped me out.
Yeah, public speaking is a skill. I know like a lot of colleges will make you take a public speaking class, but even if you're not in college, I think it's a good idea to at least learn some public speaking skills. I took a public speaking class as a requirement when I was an undergrad, and I think the class was actually probably one of my best classes just because I still use a lot of the things I learned from that class in my daily life, basically. Even in this podcast, I use those skills I learned.
Yeah, most definitely.
So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the introduction. We're going to talk with Chris again at the end of our episode, but up next, we're going to be talking with Cindy. So before we talk any more in depth about advocacy and what it is and what it looks like, I thought I would give a brief overview of how the government works again for people who may not remember their high school civics class very well. That's fine, it was a while back. So firstly, there is the federal government. This is the national government. They take care of issues that pertain to the whole country. Underneath them is the state governments. The state governments take care of issues specific to the state. So, for instance, the Kansas state government would regulate things like driver's license and implement laws that are specific to the state. Underneath the state government is going to be the county and city governments. So counties would take care of anything specific to a county. So maybe that's some kind of hospital that takes care of the entire region, right? Whereas the city would do city-specific things. So we're talking about utilities, we're talking about the police, that sort of thing. So when it comes to the national and state governments, we have what's called the legislature. This is what creates the laws for the country or the state. The legislature is divided up into 2 parts. There is the House and there is the Senate. The Senate always has 2 representatives from every constituency. So, for instance, the federal Senate is going to have 2 senators from each state. The House of Representatives, on the other hand, is based off of population. So, the more people there are in a constituency means the more representatives they have. So, there are way more representatives in the House of Representatives than there are senators. So when we're talking about making laws, we have to look at committee. So the committee will look at the bill, and if they like it, it'll move on up. If a bill starts in the House, it'll be voted on initially in the House. If it starts in the Senate, it'll be voted on there as well. That's where you get the terms HB, which means House bill, and SB, which means Senate bill. After it passes both houses, it goes off to the executive branch. So this could be either the president of the country or the governor of your state. So the president or the senator will then choose to either sign the bill into law or they will choose to veto it. If they veto it, that means that the legislature can override the veto if 2/3 of the representatives vote to do so. If 2/3 of the representatives don't vote to have the veto overridden, then the bill's dead. It didn't pass. If they do manage to override it, it becomes a law. The third branch of the government is the judicial branch. This is what the Supreme Court is part of. There is a federal Supreme Court, and there are also state Supreme Courts as well. There are other courts underneath them, but I'm not going to bore you with all those details. It can be pretty confusing. The point in bringing this up, though, is to say that the Supreme Court is there to make sure that laws aren't unconstitutional, so that they don't go against the Constitution of the United States or other state-specific laws, basically. So that's my very, very, very brief overview of the government. I hope that makes sense. There are plenty of awesome civics things out there online for you to read more about if you are curious. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into our conversations with some of our other guests today. So today we're here with Cindy. Cindy, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to be talking with Cindy just about her experiences jumping into advocacy, what that was like for her. So I guess my first big question is, how have your experiences with advocacy been so far?
So far, it's great. It's not something that I was used to doing. It's not something that I had done before, but I realized pretty quickly into this journey with one of my loved ones with mental illness that there's a lot of advocacy that needs to be done. So I got started by going last year to Mental Health Advocacy Day at the Capitol in Topeka. And through some guidance, I was able to set up an appointment with one of my legislators, which I didn't know how to do that. And that, I just called the secretary. She got me in. We picked a time. And I was a little nervous about going to visit him, but it ended up being a great conversation. He had no knowledge of Nami and what we do. So first of all, he wanted to learn a lot more about Nami, which I think it's really important that our legislators know about us because of all the free services available and what important things that we do. So he was very, very interested. And sometimes some people say they're 2 to 5 minute conversations. We probably talked for about a half an hour. And he had a lot of great questions. He informed us that it's important to keep him posted on what's going on because he has so many things going on in his office that if we don't alert him to what's going on in the mental health advocacy areas, he might not know. So he gave me his cell phone number and I can email him and I can just let him know what's going on so he can be aware of it.
Yeah, so obviously that does sound like it would be nerve-wracking. I know I would be nervous just to walk into an office and talk to a representative for the first time. So what was helpful for you going into that?
I just took a brochure and having a lot of general knowledge about Nami and sort of and a sincere approach about why this is so important. I didn't have a specific bill that I wanted to talk to him about, which sometimes they do recommend that. But at the time, there was nothing specific. 988 had already gotten passed. So we did talk about that a little bit and the importance of that. But I feel like just telling him some of my story and how sincere I am about wanting to do this, I think he took that as serious enough and gave me a lot of time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you don't have to have an agenda necessarily. Just I'm worried about this or I'm concerned about this topic, and I also want to make sure you're concerned about it too to some extent.
Exactly. And like he said, if there is a specific bill that we want him to know about, he said just email, text so that he knows what's coming up and he can help support that or at least be more aware.
Yeah, later on in this episode, we're going to be talking with Lori about her experiences with advocacy. I'm glad that you mentioned that, you went in there for a 2 to 5 minute conversation, but you had a much longer conversation.
Yes.
So in that sense, not only should you be prepared to talk very quickly, but also be prepared to have a longer conversation as well, from what I'm hearing you're saying.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes, as long as they want, to keep it going.
So let's say someone's going to go this year to Mental Health Advocacy Day, and they're going to talk to their representative. What are some things you would have done now that you've done it, if that makes sense? Like, what are some tips and advice you might give?
Well, now that I am on the Nami, Kansas Advocacy Committee, I am aware of specific bills that are in the works that people have written that are really important to me. So I would have those House bills or those Senate bills specifically lined out to talk more details about them.
How has it been for you since you took that plunge? Like, is it something you're grateful for? Is it something that's enriched your life somehow?
It's definitely enriched my life, and it gives me a lot more confidence. There's also a Nami Day at the national level, and if I ever got the opportunity to go to that, I would go do that. I have also contacted my local representative, Sharice Davids, with some issues, and I also am in contact with our local county commissioners to talk to them, because they're very, very, there are a lot of issues in the Johnson County area that they are interested in learning about too.
I'm actually glad you brought up the county commissioners. I feel like that's something that can get lost in a lot of conversations about politics. People talk about the federal level, they talk about the state level, but then there's other levels that exist, like the county level or even the city level.
At the county level, the Johnson County commissioners have definitely supported NAMI. We've had one of them come to one of our NAMI meetings to talk about advocacy. And then we have another one who has been very, very involved. Right now we have a lot of advocacy going around homeless shelter, in which we all know is related, because several people who in the homeless shelter often have a mental illness. And then a crisis center. We don't actually have a local crisis center in our county. We have one we can go to in a different county that's supported by our county, but we don't have one. And the commissioners have been very, very key in getting that approved and going forward. So through several other organizations, I've advocated with to get those two accomplished.
I mean, that's actually really big news. Johnson County is the most populated county in Kansas and doesn't even have its own crisis center. That's
yes,
kind of
that was definitely part of what was brought up. We should need to have our own.
Yeah, I think that kind of unfortunately accurately reflects sort of the state of mental health, not even just in Kansas, but across the country. Like these kind of basic things you think we'd have, but there's just gaps there. There's just nothing there. That's why we are advocates. Yeah, it's a big gap.
Yes, it is, because the one crisis center that they are able to go to is it's a good 10-15 minute drive, and it is a great option, but they also fill up. They only have a limited number of beds, and they serve several counties.
So you've talked about the county commission supporting NAMI. Have you seen any sort of buy-in from like city leaders? Have they ever coordinated with you all?
More at the city level, it seems like it's more. I'm on the CIT Council, Crisis Intervention Team Council, which I'm the NAMI representative for them. So that's where I see a lot of the city level politics or organizations, and so they're more involved in the direct police efforts and things like that. I haven't seen the city level when it comes to something like the crisis center. I have seen how they function with the homeless shelter. There is one warming shelter in one of our local cities, and I've seen how they functioned with that.
Yeah, I am glad that we brought this up. A lot of my experiences with getting things done has been at a city level, and that's very different than a state level, because as you were saying, you go and you schedule time to talk with your representative. But at a city level, you just show up at a city hall meeting one day, and normally they have some kind of time for public comment. And then if you figure out the right people to talk to, if you make a big enough sort of but if you go and you make a big enough, impression, at a city hall meeting, someone might reach out to you and then you get something done. But also there's different things at different, like basically different levels of different jurisdictions, where obviously the county would do something like a crisis shelter, whereas the city might talk about the policing specific to our city or a homeless shelter specific to our city. And so there's different sort of levels you have to interact with to get different sort of things done.
Right. And it does take a little time to figure out which avenue works best for each thing. So I would say here, the county level is probably going to be stronger with some of those bigger things.
Absolutely. So we've kind of talked a little bit about other ways we can advocate. So not just at a federal or state level, but also at a local level. Are there any other sort of avenues for people to do advocacy that isn't just strictly policy or government stuff?
Well, I mean, I think a really simple one, and this is still somewhat federal government, is just to go to nami.org and sign up for the emails. They have an advocacy page. You can get their emails. You can learn about the current policies. And that's pretty passive. You just get an email, you read about it. I just got one a few minutes ago about now that we've got 988, we still need to set it up so that it's the location thing works versus your area code. So now NAMI's working on that. So if I don't sign up for those emails, I don't know that that's going on. So I got that email. I can just read it and I can just be, informed on that.
Yeah, and there's so many different organizations that have these sign-up lists. So I think I'm subscribed to maybe like 4 or 5 of them now. So I get
yeah, there's a lot. There is a lot, but at least you can keep up and be informed. So that if it does come up in a different conversation, you at least have some information about it.
Yeah, and it'll help you stay informed too. So even if you don't have the time or the energy to go organize politically, when it comes like voting season and there's some kind of special ballot, you're not completely clueless as to what that's about and what's happening.
And they will, they will inform you by state who will support the mental health issues and things like that. So that they're doing the work for you.
I think also another way to be an advocate, just maybe because of the way I've been interacting. Let me start saying that. Hold on. I think another way to be an advocate that people tend to overlook is an even smaller level, like what's happening in your workplace or what's happening in even a place you frequent, like a community center, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a good example of an even smaller version of advocacy is like school board meetings and what the local school district is doing in their schools, both in terms of how they're treating employees and students. They have special policies that apply to things like mental health in schools as well as other things. So you can go even smaller and say, I'm a parent who has a vested interest in my child's education and how they're being treated when they're having a bad mental health day at school. Do you have any experiences with that? Or,
we did work with the schools. We, with Nami Johnson County, we worked with the schools. We showed some films on suicide. Then we would have a panel afterwards, because we do recognize it's so important there in the schools. And so we have tried to partner with them whenever we can. And also one thing I found, which I feel like is advocating and helping reduce stigma, is just opening up. Because as soon as I opened up to people who, even when I was just walking the dog and they were a neighbor and they asked how things were going, if I'm open to them, they usually have a story of someone in their family or a good friend who also has some mental health issues, and then they feel better. They can talk about it. And in some ways, I feel that's advocating just for ending the stigma and just getting it out there.
Absolutely. The large part of advocating is just being there for someone in your life, or even for yourself, self-advocacy, right? Saying,
right.
I deserve better.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to get treated the way I want to be treated, or I'm going to go to work and say, these are my boundaries. I need you to work with me on this, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And NAMI really supports that in a lot of ways.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate talking with you and hearing about your experiences.
It was great. Thanks, Isaac.
Yeah, thank you. We are here with Lori Barnes, who is one of our advocates at Nami, Kansas. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I live in a small rural area, and our oldest son, Daniel, dealt with some mental health issues and ended up taking his own life July of 2021. I had always advocated for him, and now I decided to take it to a higher level. Being in a rural area, we don't have a lot of resources, so I found Nami. I took the Nami Sparks for Advocacy classes, and I go to Topeka now and use those, and I teach the classes, and we have Nami in our rural area now. So it's just, Nami has been incredible.
And Lori, I'm sure I've said this before. I'm so sorry about everything that's happened with your son, but I'm also really glad to see that you've been able to take that tragedy and do something really important and powerful with it. And that's why we're talking about advocacy, right? So we can help other Daniels in the state of Kansas.
Right, and their families, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you are currently working on a bill that is in the legislature right now. You have House Bill 2345 going on right now. Can you tell us about that?
If you have one of these agreements, it's kind of like a middle of the road type deal where the person gets to keep their rights and they make decisions, but you help them with them. So like if you have somebody with a disability or mental illness and they can't, if they're having an episode or having problems telling people what they want at the moment or what their wishes are, you can help them with that. There's a document that you sign, and it's, you don't have to go through attorneys. You don't have to go through the courts. So the cost wise it's great. And you help them with their voice.
Well, yeah, and that's a really big thing, considering I've seen a lot of people who've had situations, where it's like my loved one is having a crisis, but I can't make a decision for them because I'm not their guardian or their power of attorney.
Right. And when they're an adult, like Daniel, he was 21. So when they become an adult, and even though you're a parent and you're still responsible for them, you have no say. Mm-hmm. And Daniel, he met every criterion to take his rights away, but during COVID, to get anything done, to get a psych eval in front of a judge was almost impossible. So this would have been a great option to have.
Right.
To be able to help him.
Right. So how did you get this bill started? Like, how do you write a bill? How do you propose a bill?
So actually, Representative Riley, he's down in our area. I'm one of his constituents. When I went and met with him in Topeka, he actually brought this bill up to me and gave me copies of it and was like, hey, this is what I'm proposing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I had never even heard of it. And so originally it was Bill 2250, but then they introduced another one for 2345. That's there now. And they put it in the Judiciary Committee. I've learned so much about everything. There is committees that are non-exempt, and that's one of them. So it didn't die at the end of the session last year. It has 2 years in the committee that we have time to get it passed versus.
So non-exempt means it can kind of go longer than just that.
Yeah, one session. It can go for 2 more years. And I had no idea. I met with Representative Patton, and he was like, oh, well, we just got this one in and it's exempt. You have 2 years now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never had even heard about that and didn't know about it. So now we have House Bill 2345, and they did a informational type hearing last year in Judiciary, and then we actually had the hearing January 17th of this year. So
just recently.
Yeah, so that was my first time I've done written testimony and turned it in, but I have never gone to the committee and actually talked. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but I did it. And Representative Humphreys was lovely. She made me feel comfortable, and I had some support there with me. And it's just, we were all, we had the proponents for it. We all talked, and then there was, of course, some opponents. So that's the struggle we have right now is trying to get an agreed upon version so the judiciary can pass it and get it to the House.
Right. And so before this point, you said you had reached out to Riley, right? Senator Riley?
Right. Representative Riley. Yeah.
Representative Riley, excuse me. So you reached out to him. When you were talking with him originally, were you just going to the House just to say, hey, I'm looking for mental health bills to be done? Or why were you reaching out to him?
Yeah, I was looking for mental health stuff. I was meeting with every rep I could get my hands on, so I met with some my constituents, but I also reached out and looked when I got online in the Kansas legislator website. I looked at people who were in Health and Human Services, judiciary, and met with people just like, hey, this is my story. What can I do? What is there out there that I can do to help people with mental health issues and their families? So, and one of the first people I actually met with was Representative Berquist, and I'm not one of his constituents, but actually I had emailed like Ron Estes, Marshall, like all the people in DC, and Ron Estes actually called Emo Berkowitz and said, I would like you to talk to her.
Wow.
So that was my first call. And so I met with him, and he's wonderful. Representative Carpenter is wonderful. He even told me, and I said, I know I'm not your constituent, but I'm trying to get information. He goes, I'm here for everybody in Kansas, not just my people, Representative Landwehr. I've met so many people up there that are just human. And, and at first I was so nervous, but they're really people like us, and they understand and they want to help. And, you always run into a couple that are not in favor of the bill you want. And that's kind of hard to, sit back and try to explain to them why. But that's going to happen.
Yeah. And it's great to hear that you can hit up so many different people. Like that statement that he's here for all of Kansas, not just the people who elected him in. That's a great statement. So it's like, maybe your representative doesn't agree with you on this one thing, but there's other people in the House and the Senate who will agree with you on it and will help you.
Right.
It just takes that plunge. You got to jump in and say, hey, I'm looking for someone.
Yeah. And that's what I've had to do is I've learned, I go to the Capitol a couple times a year, and I have my list like the Nami Smarts has a template that you can put all the elected official stuff on there. And I have all of their information on there, and I take it with me, and it's alphabetical, and I have the room numbers, and I have, and so I have my plan. And if I have to stalk somebody outside of their office, I do, because sometimes you can't get meetings with them, right. But that's where the elevator speech comes in handy that we teach in the Smarts class, that I have 30 seconds. Like, I'm going to just give you real quick what I want to talk to you about,
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned that some people oppose your bill sometimes.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that's one of the challenges you face. What are other challenges you might face while proposing a bill?
So you have people on the committee that are opposed to it, but then you also have, like with this House Bill 2345, the Kansas Bar has a problem with some of the information in there. And the Kansas Banker Associations have some problems with, the wording. So we are actually working, the Disability Rights Center, and I'm helping and some others, working with them to find an agreed upon, I don't know what you call format, or, where we can take it back to the House and say, look, we have this now, like the Kansas Bar back in, was it 2019? They made the National Bar, actually not Kansas, said, we're for supportive decision-making agreements. So I'm like, okay, so then why does our Kansas Bar have an issue? And in 2019, this bill actually passed before I was even involved with it, the House. It just never made it out of the House, and so there's so much in the background that you have to finagle to try to get it to go.
Yeah, you've been doing this for longer than me, but even in my kind of brief experiences with policy stuff, so much of it is arguing about language.
Yes.
Like, how are we going to write the bill? How are we defining our terms? Like, there's a lot of, it's very pedantic.
Yeah, it is. And you get the attorneys who are some of these attorneys that are retired that are on these committees. They are very particular, and when I met with one of them, he disagrees with this bill. And he goes, well, there's no accountability. I'm like, yeah, there is. I mean, if you go look on the back of this bill, it's criminal. If you take advantage of somebody, if you do, it's all there, and well, I'll have to read it again, So, and I go, and if you don't like it, and tell me what you want amended on it, like, let's work on this. Let's try to figure it out.
That's the problem, is when people say, I don't like this, and they don't really propose, like, this is what I want from it. It's just, I don't like it the way it is. It's like, okay.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, then, like, there's something we could do.
It's a very proactive position trying to push for policy. Like, you have to really be on top of it, from my kind of experience. Yeah, that's true for you as well, you think? Being very proactive.
Oh, yeah. And I email, I send people, like, I make a page list of all of the committee's information and their emails. I send that to everybody I know. They say, I want you to email this person, and I want you to tell them you're for this, because I fear the more people reach out to them and are for the bill, maybe they will listen. I don't know.
I mean, it's worked before. So, I mean, people will say, hey, my constituents seem to care about this issue. So,
yeah. And it's amazing, too, when you get people. There are a couple lobbyists I know, and one of them helps me, too. Like, he'll go chat with, some of the reps, or what do you think about this? Or what do you, and he kind of helps me behind the scenes. I mean, you kind of have to get your little group, but it works. Yeah. It just takes a while to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. You need that support on a broader scale. One person can't do everything, unfortunately.
Right.
So where's the bill at right now?
We are working with the bar, Kansas Bar, and the Kansas Bankers on getting some amendments. They keep bringing up power of attorney, like all this stuff's on the judicial site, and it's not. It's power of attorney stuff. It's not. We don't want power over them. We want actually to help them, not have power over them.
All right. So where's the bill at right now?
Right now we're working with the Kansas Bankers and the Kansas Bar on amendments. The attorneys, the Kansas Bar are like, there's power of attorneys on the judicial site. There's paperwork already out there, but we don't want power over them. We want to help, we want to be there to assist them, not be their voice. We just want to help them be their voice. And so we're working on that. The Bankers Association they're worried that we will take advantage of them financially. We don't want their PIN number. We don't want access to their account. It'd just be like, hey, let's look at their bank statement and say, oh, wow, they've, impulse spending again right now. Maybe we need to have a chat. I mean, it's basically helping them and teaching them and working with them versus having control, and like I said, there's stuff in the back. It's crimes to take advantage and everything else. So it's like some of that's in there, but obviously they have some other things they want to deal with.
Right. Absolutely. And I understand the caution.
Right. And I do too. And this could be used even with the guardianship, but when you get guardianships and that stuff, it basically the court is in charge, and that's not what you want. That's not what we're wanting with this bill.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll come hopefully we'll come to a conclusion on a great, actual amendment so we can present it to the judiciary again and have it passed.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping for the best. My kind of conception of this, from the way you've been describing it, is more like a I'm going to, like, you are going to consent to me monitoring you. So if you're having a manic episode, a psychotic episode, I can say this person, my loved one needs to be hospitalized until they can kind of come down and start making good decisions again.
Yeah, because like Daniel would have signed, this paper with us. And so when we called the crisis unit in 3 times in 2 weeks, and be like, look, we have this signed notarized paper. He does want help, because, he said he's fine. But look, he cannot make decisions when he's having an episode, right? So here's his paper that has what he wants and what decisions he wants. Monitor him for 24 hours or ask him more questions. Make sure he's okay. Just don't take, I'm fine, and leave. I mean, or like if somebody's impulse spending or, even if somebody that has a disability who lives in a home, that helps people and they can't communicate as well, you can help them with that communication.
Right. Yeah. I have a friend who they're not in Kansas, unfortunately, but I know they'd love a law like this because they have psychotic episodes sometimes, and their mom has to become their guardian or something, and it's probably more what they need, honestly. Is that?
Yeah, and right now, I want to say there's 27 states that have some type of supportive decision-making agreement in place, and the District of Columbia. So there's more than half of the states right now that have something in place. I'm like, okay, we need to move that direction too. We need to be one of them that are,
All right. So it was still in the House, working on some amendments and stuff.
Right.
What comes next after this?
Well, I'm hoping we can get the amendments and we can go back to the Judiciary Committee, and they'll be like, okay, great. Everybody's an amendment. Let's go around the committee and let's get this, hopefully everybody says yes to it, or at least the majority of it says yes to it. Fingers crossed, yes. And then they can approve it and they can present it to the House.
And then the House will hopefully vote on it.
Right, and then it'll go to the Senate. So, and I've already been working with some people on the Senate, as me and the disability rights. So hopefully, I know we have some people that are for it on the Senate, so we'll just have to kind of push it that direction then.
And if someone is listening to this and thinking, oh, that sounds like a great bill, I'd like to support it, what would you recommend that they do?
I would email everybody on the Judiciary Committee and make sure when you email in the subject column, put, HB 2345 and, tell them, not make it a really long email, but tell them, hey, I've noticed the supportive decision-making agreement. This is kind of in a short few sentences. This is our situation. This would help us, please, can you support this bill?
And if somebody wants to monitor its progress, the Kansas legislature's website is normally a pretty good place to look at
you
stuff,
can
right?
hit, on the left-hand side, you can push when it said there's bill, it says find your bill, and you can put 2345 there, and it'll pull it up.
On that website, too, I know you can find different representatives on there, their contact info, which districts they represent, which committees they're in, what committees exist. Like, there's a lot of stuff on that website.
Yeah. And if you click Judiciary, that's where this bill is. It'll pull up everybody that's on the Judiciary Committee. And then you can click on each person,
Well, Lori, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really glad that we have someone involved with our advocacy efforts that has this lived experience of, experiencing something, helping propose a bill, and then tracking it as it goes through the whole legislative process. Obviously, we're still in the House, but I mean,
Right.
You've already made it far. Like, considering how many bills just kind of die immediately, you're going somewhere with it.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your
You're welcome, Isaac. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now we're back with Chris, and we're going to be talking about how you can get involved with advocacy work if that seems interesting to you. So, Chris, what does Nami, Kansas have coming up?
So Nami, Kansas has the Advocacy Day on March 13th coming up. And then before that, on March 12th, we have the Nami Smarts classes. And those will be located at the Nami office in the Topeka Mall.
Yeah, we're here in Westridge Mall. Sorry, Chris normally is in another office, but I am all the time. So we are at the Westridge Mall in Topeka. And then the next day, we will be going to the Capitol to do some advocacy work. And that will be with the Kansas Mental Health Coalition, who is a great group to follow if you're wanting to keep up with advocacy stuff. What are some other ways that people can keep up with advocacy alerts and such?
So you can also go to the Kansas legislation website, and you can follow along with, they have live hearings and live updates as well with whatever's going on during the legislative sessions.
Yeah, those websites are really great. I'm on there all the time. They have all the committees listed on there, all the representatives on there. You can keep track of what they are doing. Another thing is that NAMI, the national organization, also sends out advocacy alerts. If you go to the advocacy tab on NAMI.org, you're able to sign up for those. Well, Chris, before we close up this episode, do you have any final closing thoughts?
No, all I wanted to say is anybody can advocate. And if you're scared to start, the best way to do it is probably get in touch with NAMI. Go to our website and look up, I think we have a calendar on there that'll show you the advocacy days and also the trainings that we will be putting on. And it costs nothing to join.
Absolutely nothing. And if you can't come to the Topeka training, since Kansas is a big state, we're also able to do online trainings or whatever. Just reach out to us and ask. I can help you. Chris can help you. Lori can help you as well. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on to our podcast today. I really appreciate it. I also want to send one last thank you to both Cindy and Lori for also coming on to our podcast today. Thank you all for listening. Until next time, I am Nami, Kansas.
I am Nami, Kansas as well.